So let me just welcome everybody to Advanced Training. This is our sixth learning module, and today we're going to learn about advertorials. Just a few minutes before everybody popped on, Pam and I were talking about them and kind of talking about how they've evolved. They're pretty neat things, and not a lot of people actually talk about them or teach them. So I think today's session is going to be very valuable for you. Let me just go. So just a quick introduction. I see this slide so much, I feel like I need to change it up. I used to work at Agora Publishing, which is probably the largest newsletter publisher out there, about $500 million in sales. I ran one of their divisions. I worked in most of their divisions, from health, business opportunity, financial. I worked with all kinds of marketers, trained many copywriters who are now superstars, written copy myself, and now I serve as your copy chief for Advanced Training. So we're going to learn advertorials. We're going to learn what they are, who uses them. I'm going to give you some examples and then some tips for writing. And then, as you know, the clients that are participating in Advanced Training, Barefoot Writer, New Market Health, and Oxford Club, have assignments for you. However, before we get to the training part, I want to make an announcement, and I think it's going to be exciting for several members. As you know, part of Advanced Training is being able to submit assignments to the clients that are participating, with the goal and hope that your work will be chosen. And so today I'm going to tell you some people whose work has been chosen.
Yay! This is one of those points where I'm going to jump in.
We've received several submissions for Barefoot Writer and went through them, and there are submissions that we feel have potential, and we want to work with the people who submitted them. So let me tell you who those winners are. And if I butcher your name, please forgive me, is Yoda Rivera. She wrote a Barefoot Writer news item, which really liked and want to work with you, Yoda. Sherry Caldwell wrote some ad inserts. We love
Yay, Sherry, I see you here.
And Sherry wrote some ad inserts for us, but we want to keep working with you, Sherry. Julie Gubler also wrote a news item for Barefoot Writer. We liked it and want to work with you, Julie. So congratulations. Kara Flett also wrote a news item. Really like that one too.
Kara's here.
So
Yay,
Kara will work with you. And so those are the submissions that we picked for Barefoot Writer. So congratulations, and we're going to be in touch with you and let you know the next steps moving forward.
And Sandy, that'll probably be the first of the year, right?
Yeah, the holidays are right around the corner. But we wanted to let everybody know. Now, also, you know, New Market Health and Oxford Club are participating clients. And so from New Market Health, there are some people that we know are working with Tom, who is the contact for New Market Health, and Rob Gramer and Amanda Foxcroft, I believe, have some assignments from New Market Health now. So congratulations to you guys. And we also heard that Tom mentioned that there are two other people he feels has promise. One is Nicole Piper, and the other one is Adria Schemthorst. Sorry if I got your last name wrong. So he made a mention that he feels that you have potential, so you may be hearing from Tom, too, on some possible assignments. Oxford Club, go ahead.
Oh, now, and I was just going to say, and this is just after, this is all based on the very first assignment. So we're still very early into this, and to have this many people rising to the top already is great. But if your name hasn't been called, just know that, again, this is a lot, and it's very encouraging and very promising. And you know, we still have a long ways to go in this whole process, and there's going to be so many more opportunities.
Absolutely. There definitely will be. And I just wanted to mention that we talked to Oxford Club, and they didn't have anybody at this point in time, but they did make the point that they're still keeping in touch and looking over all the submissions that are coming in. So there's still potential there with Oxford Club. So again, congratulations to everybody. And as Katie said, even if your name wasn't announced, you know, don't fret, because there's a lot more that is coming down the pike, and, you know, we'll always be looking at submissions. So, and as we've said in many other places, at boot camp and different webinars, that just because you submit something and you don't hear right away, that doesn't mean that the door is shut. That door can reopen a year from now. They could be contacting you. So just remember that. Okay, so let's get going here, and let's figure out what these advertorials are. And I'm calling it the crazy world of advertorials. So I always like to know a little bit about the history of any kind of project or anything I'm taking on. I just have this need to know, you know, a little bit more about them. So I thought it'd be good for you all to understand the history of advertorials, even though we've been saying they seem new. They've been around since 1946. You're probably mostly familiar with seeing them in newspapers, in magazines. Sometimes they used to be referred to as tear sheets. And, you know, what's funny is that they used to be assigned to junior staff writers. No one really realized the potential of advertorials until years later, and now copywriters are really the ones who are making the most of them. And so, you know, they've matured now. They're more sales-oriented. They bring in names. They can be used for lead generation. And radio, believe it or not, used to use them to fill airtime. So they really have gone through this evolution of space fillers to actual vehicles that marketers and publishers use to make money or get leads. So what is an advertorial? Well, I put this in here because they sort of are a disguised type of a unique thing. And by that, what I mean is that, as the name implies, an advertorial is a combination or a hybrid of an ad and an editorial piece combined together. They look like, talk like an editorial piece, but really the secret desire is to generate revenue or a lead for the marketer or the publisher. But as we get further in here, you'll see they do sort of look like editorial content. But as you read through, you'll see that they are geared toward moving a prospect to action, either, as I said, to get a lead or to generate a sale. So that's why I say it's like priming the pump. Now, there's a little bit of this debate. They're called some people call them other names, sponsored content, native ads. And if you go online, you'll see some people say, oh, there's a big difference between a native ad and an advertorial. I don't believe there is. Some of the argument is that a native ad is sort of like mimics the experience that a prospect might have with a particular website or magazine. And so I'm like, well, mimic experience, I don't quite know what that is, so I don't know how you can really distinguish and say that there's something completely different. So I prefer to group them together. And here's some interesting things that I found about advertorials, because as we go through this, you'll see when I show you examples, you know, when we talk about them being a hybrid between a mix of an ad and an editorial, it brings up the thing, well, are we being disingenuous to the prospect? Some cases there might be, but studies are showing that as these advertorials have evolved over the years, that they actually are becoming more credible, and the prospects' skepticism is actually going down. So that's why I put some of this in here. So there's a study from Dartmouth, Stanford, that found that they actually look like credible sources. Northwestern University found that advertorials actually do persuade people, and they're viewed now as trusted content. New York Times also did a study and saw that readers spend the same amount of time on their sponsored content or advertorials as they did with traditional straight-out editorial essays. And Native Advertising Institute says that advertorials are conquering the world right now, and I think that's so true. I see them a lot online, and just coming from Agora, I can tell you that they're widely used there as a big source for bringing in names and leads. This is another interesting thing that Reader's Digest did a split test and wanted to just find out this very thing we're talking about, the prospect's perception of an advertorial. And what they found when they did their split test is that the advertorial ended up selling 81% more products. So that just shows you there the power of an advertorial, if done correctly. So now, why do publishers and marketers like to use them? Well, as you can see here, and as I've alluded to earlier, they generate a lot of leads, 3 times as many. They have higher conversion rates. Readers are more likely to read an advertorial than a traditional ad, and they're viewed more often than banner ads. And look at the amount of money that's being spent on this very thing. You know, in 2015, $7.9 billion, and projected to go to $21 billion. That just shows you what Native Advertising Institute said earlier, that, you know, they're conquering the world. Marketers and publishers are seeing the power of an advertorial, which is why we want to teach you how to write advertorials and really educate you on them so that you can be one of these people that are helping these publishers generate leads and get more sales for their business. So advertorials take 2 forms, long and short form. And a long form is probably what you've seen in the past when in the print world, in magazines or newspapers, they match the content of that particular print media. They look like an editorial, I can't even speak now, they look like an editorial piece, but they really are an advertisement, a long-form advertisement, and they'll usually have at the top the little words advertisement printed on them. This is an example of a long-form advertorial that you might find in like a magazine, and I didn't put the whole thing in here. It's a whole length of a magazine page, but this looks like you know, editorial content, but really this is trying to move the prospect to take action. Here's another one, and on this one at the top you can see in little tiny print it's marked as advertisement, but this again is another example of a long form advertorial. This whole page would be filled, even though we can't see it from the little screenshot I grabbed, but the whole thing takes up the entire page. Here's another long form example, and this is one, hope I can say this, Pam Foster wrote it. Her being a really well-trained copywriter understands the power of an advertorial. And so this is an example of a long form where you get to see the whole thing. Okay, so we went over long form. So just to reinforce that point, the long form are exactly that, long form advertorial, lots of copy, fill up an entire page of a magazine or the newspaper or whatever printed medium it's going in. There are also short form advertorials, usually just a couple paragraphs. They have some kind of caption. Again, doing the same thing as we saw with the long form. They're geared to be a pre-sale, and you mostly see these online. And I think it really was BuzzFeed, if you're familiar with that website, and if you're not, go check it out. It was really probably one of the first online websites that really started making use of online short-form advertorials, and it really has help their business in terms of sales by having a lot of short-form online advertorials. Now, here's an example of a short-form online advertorial, and this is a screenshot of Drudge. And the advertorial, there too, they're identical. It's the picture with President-elect Donald Trump and Paul Ryan. And they have it one on the left and the right column. That's an example of an online advertorial. So, and you'll see it says sponsored by at the top of the picture. And that's a sign that's an advertorial, but people will be driven to click on that because they're going to read something, and probably that thing that they're going to read is going to take them to an actual sales page, or it could be to capture a name for lead generation, like signing up to an e-letter. Here's another one. Again, and I don't remember what website this is on, but you can see where the arrow is pointing down here are advertorials. They have videos that they want people to click on to learn more, so they're probably, this is taking them to a landing page where the video plays, and there'll be some more content there. Another example, here's another news site, and you can see at the bottom, there's advertorials. So they're kind of merged in and fit with all the other news items that are on these particular websites, and that's why people, sort of gravitate toward them. And it's a perfect demonstration of what we said earlier. It's a combination of an editorial and an ad, that advertorial. So this is just to reiterate and reinforce what we've been saying, that they can take two forms, long and short, and the big takeaway is that they're trying to match the media that they're in. So if you're writing an advertorial for a magazine and they want it long form, it's going to look like the articles that are in that magazine. And as we just saw with the websites, when they're short online, it's going to look similar to content that's placed on that website. But the goal, regardless of whether it's a long form or short form, is to get the reader to take some kind of specific action. And that's the important part, which is why I threw this in here, is you always want a call to action in your advertorial. So you can't get away with writing an advertorial without some kind of call to action, because if you leave that out, then it really starts to become more of an editorial piece than an advertorial, where we're trying to move the prospect to take a specific action. So how do they work? What I want to focus on today are the ones that I showed you online. And the reason why is because that's really where a lot of the action is happening, is the online short-form advertorials that I just showed you on these various websites. A lot of successful publishers and companies, marketers, are finding that that's a great way to get names for their business or to get a sale right there up front. And so I want to focus on these because that's the cutting edge of advertorial. So that's the one thing you really want to learn. So when I talk about these online advertorials that I showed you, we're talking about the ones that are used on display networks. And a display network is, think of an advertising agency. They're sort of the middleman. So they're the person that usually the marketer or publisher goes to and says, here I have an advertorial. Can you distribute this to all the websites that are out there? Because imagine a marketer, a publisher, they're not going to have time to call up every one of these websites, ad department, and say, hey, I want to place my advertorial and negotiate all of these fees. That would be a very time-consuming process, especially if they're trying to reach a lot of people. That's where these display network or content distribution companies come in. They do that work for the publishers. So they'll have relationships with many, many sites, newspaper, magazines, and they'll be able to place that for the marketer so that they don't have to do that specific work. However, the marketer still has to have that advertorial written. That's where you, as a copywriter, comes in. So display network, there's a couple. We all know about Google has a display network and a content network. There's also Taboola and Outbrain. Taboola reaches about 1 billion people every month through the different sites that they work with. And Outbrain reaches about 557 million people a month. So that's a lot of people that would be looking at the advertorial that you've written for your client. And now you can see the power of working with a content distributor because they just have built these partnerships up and can get the ad placed in a lot of places so that there's maximum exposure for that advertorial that you've written. And the way that it works, the marketer, the publishing company will pay per click. So when you're online in those, let's say that one I showed you earlier for Drudge, if you were to have clicked on that, anytime you click on an advertorial, the marketer has to pay a fee for that. But in return, as long as the advertorial is written properly and there's a call to action, they can recoup that expense because they'll either have a sale that they're making right away or they'll capture that name that they'll put on their file and send to that file different promotions. So they'll get their money back, but they do pay some kind of fee to do it. Those content distributors that I mentioned earlier, Taboola and Outbrain, they have partnerships with the major players online. So CNN, USA Today, Business Insider, Chicago, Time, People. I mean, this is just a partial list. You can go check out, and I would encourage you to go check out Taboola or Outbrain. Just go to their website. They have little, infographics that explain how it works. But they'll show you, you can see all the many partnerships they work with. So if I was a marketer and I was going to Taboola and I said, hey, I want to place my advertorial, they would come back and say, okay, here's a list of the 20 different businesses we work with. We could place them on all of these or some of these. So they have quite a deep reach. So advertorials work in 3 little steps. So the reader sees it. They read the advertorial. And the advertorial generally will take them to a sales letter, or it may take them to a landing page where they're going to capture a name. In most cases, one of the things that we're seeing lately is that most of the advertorials are taking them to a sales where the company that's creating that advertorial, they want to get that return on investment right away, right up front. So generally it's taking them to a promotion which is going to sell the prospect to click on the advertorial to buy a particular product. So how do we rate an advertorial? And like everything in copywriting, there's certain specific elements you need it, and they're all the elements that we've been learning and that you've learned as you've been going down this journey to becoming a copywriter with AWI, that these elements are just fundamental no matter what you're writing. Ad inserts, as we've learned in previous ADC learning modules, everything that we've been doing usually evolves around certain criteria. And so this is what we want to write when we're creating an advertorial. We need a headline, we need a lead, we need a transition. It's also referred to as the turn, and a call to action, right? So that's pretty much like if you're writing a regular sales letter, you're going to have a headline, you're going to have a lead, you're going to have a transition or a body copy, you're going to have a call to action, or as a sales promotion, a close. So all the same elements are there. Here are 2 examples, and we're kind of going to break these down to show you those elements that I just walked through so you can kind of see what they look like. Okay, so this is an advertorial for Jim Rickards, very popular in the financial newsletter publishing industry, has a lot of books, and he literally used to work with the CIA. So this is an advertorial for a financial service, and this is generally what it would be. It would look like this, whether it's on CNN or Drudge or wherever it shows up. It would be on their home page, and it'd be surrounded with other pieces of content, but this is pretty much what that ad will look like. So let's break it down into the components we just walked through. The headline, here it is, CIA insider, forget Iran, Iraq, Ukraine, and Syria. This is where World War III will start. The lead, this is just a paragraph, but remember the short form advertorials we're talking about, there's not a lot of copy, but even though the copy's short, we're still following these 4 elements. So this is the lead in this particular one. And this is the transition or the turn. What's happening here is this is starting to drive the prospect. It's a little peak of the action we want the prospect to take. That's why we call it the transition or the turn, because the next thing we're going to show is that call to action. So this is where we start to lead the prospect to the action we want them to take. In this case, we want them to click on the video. And as I see this now, it would have been probably pretty cool probably to hyperlink that video so we could see it. But if you were to click on that, the landing page that it takes you to is where the video plays, there's copy, and it's selling you a financial newsletter. This is the other one I showed you, so we're going to do the same thing so we could see the elements of this advertorial, and this is for a health product. Here's the headline, Boston scientists develop new probiotic supplement to manage weight. Here's the lead. The other one that we saw in financial was a short little sentence. This is one sentence, they're a little bit longer, but still, remember, again, working with limited space, and we're just trying to maximize the copy that we're putting in that limited space. This is the lead to this advertorial. Here's the transition. So again, now we're at that point, you know, we've got this little bit of space. We've hooked them with a headline. We've got a lead. Now we're in this transition phase of the copy where we're going to lead the prospect to the call to action. And that call to action was try sample today. And let me see if I can go back. So you'll see that down at the bottom of this, that little red space down there, that's the call to action down there, and I just highlighted it right there. So that's the click, the call to action. And the other one, we wanted them to click on a video. This one, they want them to try a sample, and that's taking them to a landing page that probably has them filling out information. They're going to capture that person's name to get a lead. So now that you know the elements, I just wanted to put this in here. Always keep this in mind when we're going to write a headline, because that's what's going to capture that prospect's attention when they're looking at your advertorial. So how do we create a compelling headline? If we follow the 6 U's, that's going to help us. We want to be ultra-specific. We want to be unique. We want to be urgent. We want to be useful. We want to be ultra-fascinating or curiosity-driven, and we want to be ultra-relevant. So as you start writing your headline for your advertorial, remember these 6 U's. You probably can't get all 6 in there. It'd be very difficult, but if you could get 4 of them, great. So the more you get of these 6 U's in your headline, the stronger your headline will be to capture that reader's attention on your advertorial. So I wanted to give you a little demonstration. There's a little technique, too, when you're writing an advertorial, particularly in the headline, that we want to just kind of follow along with we know that the way that we know would make an advertorial work. So just take a look at these 2 headlines. Same thing, but there's a little difference in wording. So the first one, zombie apocalypse is nigh according to research. New research suggests that the zombie apocalypse is nigh. So I put them here because I'm going to ask you just take a few minutes, look at them, and just think about which one you think is a stronger headline. Okay, here's the stronger headline. The zombie apocalypse is nigh according to new research. The reason this is stronger, this is in advertorial language, they call it front loading. The focus is the zombie apocalypse, so we're putting that right up in the front of the headline, whereas the other one, the new research was the focus, and the zombie apocalypse was the secondary focus. So we want to front load it by putting the strongest element, the thing that is the most strongest thing that we want to say in the headline. That's why the zombie apocalypse. That's really what we want to have the reader focus in. New research, that's not so exciting, but this thing about a zombie apocalypse, that really captures the reader's attention. So that's why we're front-loading our headlines with the strongest wording we can right up in the beginning. So what type of things make an advertorial work? As you probably can guess by looking at some of the ones we've shown on websites, current events really help drive clicks. So if you can play off the news, that makes your advertorial relevant. So if you look around and you're Googling and you're trying to figure out what you can write for your client, think about what's happening in the news as you're writing your advertorial. Take some time to research, because now you'll see what's top of mind for the prospect. And if there's a way that you can play the news to your favor, those really work well for advertorials. Is there something new, like the one we just talked about, zombie apocalypse is coming, some new thing or event that's happening, a new technology, like iPhones, a new edition is going to be released. Is there approval on a drug by the FDA? Is Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve going to raise interest rates? These type of things will naturally capture the prospect's attention because it's top of mind, because they're seeing it all the time in the news, television, online. So if you can construct your advertorial playing on the news, your chances of getting people to click are going to be so much greater. Other things you can do is, public figures and big names. As I said, Janet Yellen, President-elect Trump, things like that you can put in your advertorial will help really get the prospect to pay attention and click. If you have to name countries, companies, quotes from experts or real people, these things help just make your advertorial very stronger. I will say a word of caution. If you're going to use companies, you have to be careful because, that can be seen as trading on a name. And so some companies are not in the public figure. Well, most government officials are, you can widely use those. But certain companies you can't. So you have to be careful, and that's the kind of question that you want to ask your client when you're working with them. What are their policies as far as trading on names and what you can and can't say. So you need to find that up front. But if they give you permission and they find it safe and their lawyers have blessed it, then do it, because it will help get click-throughs. If you can coin a phrase, that also helps drive clicks and captures the prospect's attention. And the reason why is because it isn't anything they've heard before. Anything that sounds new to a prospect really helps them sort of, pay attention to it. And I put this in here. Stansberry Research coined a phrase which I thought was brilliant. This was a couple years ago, and they're selling financial services, and they talked about a blue sheeting technique, and it was just about how to find certain stocks. But nobody had heard this blue sheeting technique, so that's an example of trying to find something new that the reader hasn't heard. So if you can do that kind of work, it will help your advertorial, it will help you get the click. Listicles are very popular, and people seem to really love them. So, for Barefoot Writer, we have 9 ways to make a living as a writer, 7 hot stocks, 2017, 3 ways to fight Alzheimer's, where you can sort of give the reader, 10 points, 3 points, 7 points, just kind of make a list of things that they could do. That really works well when you're creating an advertorial. Of course, all of this is being said, understanding we have this emotional element that we're kind of working with. It's sort of in the back of our heads as we're creating our advertorials. Are we going to hit on fear? Are we going to hit on greed, outreach, curiosity, opportunity? So think about that as you sit down to construct your advertorial. you want to kind of know, like, your plan of attack. What kind of emotion are you trying to draw upon to get the prospect to pay attention to the advertorial you're creating? Again, this is a conversation you probably would have with your client. They'll kind of give you, hey, these kind of fear-based packages seem to work for us, so can we create a fear-based advertorial or a greed or an outrage type of one? So I would encourage you to sort of, and this is, again, just a few list of emotions. You can kind of make a list of them, of more of them, and sort of ask your client, which one they have the most success with. Get some feedback from them, and then you'll know what direction you want to go when you start to write your advertorial. A couple more tips. I just believe and feel like curiosity is one of the strongest elements that you can have in any copy. The more that you can ignite someone's curiosity and make them sort of stop and think and wonder in that sense of fascination, it really helps to draw the prospect in, and if you continue that all the way through, it'll get them to click over to the action you want them to take. So I like them, and they work well online, and so I would suggest playing around if you can find a way to create a high degree of curiosity in your advertorial. And as we just said, make sure you bring out some kind of emotion. You should strive to have images in your advertorial, whether it's a video, as we saw with the one with Jim Rickards, some kind of infographic, a map, anything like that. Your client will probably work with you on the image they want to use. If they don't have ideas, please suggest some images to go with your copy. And as we saw earlier in all the examples, there's usually some kind of image there. So, and I believe that if you check Taboola and Outbrain, they'll even recommend that you use images in your advertorial. It's just another way to capture the prospect's attention. Besides the word, the image also will, pull the eye toward your advertorial. So just make sure that you think about, the images, and just don't clutter it up. You don't want like a bunch of images. You just want one that really helps to highlight a particular point or sort of teases that degree of curiosity that we're trying to go for. And if you have captions, always put a caption underneath your image. That's just sort of like a old, I want to say, direct response 101, that anytime you put an image, always have a caption with it, because your reader doesn't know necessarily what you're trying to convey with that image, and so we want to help them. We put a caption underneath of it. The more room you leave for doubt with your prospect, it just starts to be where the prospect may not take action, may not look at your advertorial, may not click. So we want to remove any doubt for the prospect all of the time, which is why we take the time to do these little details, putting a caption with our image. Make it relevant. I want to provide some value. And as you saw in examples and later on, you can go back and look through this, read those examples. You see it's not straight 100% copy talk. Remember, an advertorial is a merger of editorial and advertising. So we want to provide some value, which means we want to impart some kind of aha moment or tidbit, interesting fact to the reader, so that it doesn't feel like all sell, sell, sell in your advertorial. This is important. We want to match the media that the advertorial is being placed in. So as you work with your client, and if they say that, look, I'm running this through Taboola or Outbrain, and here are the different partner sites that we'll be working with, go look at those partner sites before you start to write your advertorial, because now you're going to get a sense of that media and the way that it positions its content, so that it'll help you write a stronger advertorial. And even if you don't know what partner site that the client will be working with, as you know, as we saw earlier, since Taboola and Outbrain work with almost everybody, if you just go to sites like CNN and even Drudge and start looking at those advertorials, use this as an opportunity to sort of self-study what an advertorial is all about. So go out there, find them, collect them, make a swipe file of advertorials so that if you're asked to actually write one, you've got a whole bunch in front of you. You'll be current. You'll know exactly what's working. You'll know the media that the different places that your advertorial might be placed. So you just kind of give yourself a little bit of an edge if you sort of get in front of everybody and kind of just start collecting advertorials. I can't stress this enough. You've got to have a call to action. We want the prospect to do something. So as much as we want to have a compelling headline, as much as we want to give them something of value, we also want them to take action. It doesn't do us any good to write an advertorial and be flat and it goes nowhere and the prospect does nothing because we haven't said do something, which could be click over here, read more, watch this video. So remember, you've got to have a call to action. Of course, to write an advertorial for your client, you have to actually know their product and service. Sounds elementary, but it's really important that you take the time to study it so that you know it well enough that you, remember, you're taking all this information, you're trying to condense it down to a short form online advertorial. So the more you know about the product, the better you'll be able to shrink that information down into bite-sized chunks of information that the prospect can find valuable. So take the time to look at the product and just feel like you know it well enough. Don't mention pricing on advertorials. Remember, we're not trying to, this is not a hard sell in the advertorial. That's what the promotion will do. If we're going to ask the prospect to click over to the promotion, that promotion will do that hard work of selling and justifying the price and the value proposition. So you don't have to worry about that in your advertorial. You're just trying to get them to click over to the advertorial. A dead giveaway that it's an advertorial is when you use exaggerated claims. So we don't necessarily want to be hyperbolic because remember, this is a merger of some ad copy with editorial. We want the reader to feel like they're gaining some knowledge from what our advertorial is saying without feeling oversold. We already talked about the importance of studying advertorials that are working. And I mentioned this earlier, you can get ideas if you just go and Google and see what's relevant and what's happening. That's a good clue to sort of what you can write your advertorial on. You can play up controversy. You know, you're going to get screwed out of money by the Federal Reserve. Some people may believe that, some don't. But if you can play up controversy, that would help your advertorials. When you write your call to action, if you can make it a little more compelling than a generic click here, the better. So it might be like learn about this awesome service here, that type of language. Create urgency. You know, it's a limited time, only 100 people. That type of thing in your call to action really helps to spur the person to click over. And again, you know, we're just giving them a seed of idea. That's what we talked about, the little bit of aha moment, that little bit of editorial that's sort of wrapped in with this advertising language that we're putting in our advertorial. You can tell a story. It's a short form mostly, so your story will be condensed. So you want to get the best parts of the story in there. Your headline can be part of the story. That's where you can create your headline. Your lead can have a little bit, your transition. So you can use a story, but you're just taking little condensed little nuggets out of the bigger story and putting it down in your advertorial. And I put this up here as an example of how to use what's currently happening and just Googling for ideas. So I was thinking, well, if I was going to write a financial advertorial, one of the things that I'm seeing right now is, you know, people talking about banks and the security of banks and the safety of banks. And so I Googled that, and I Googled CNN because I figured I know that probably CNN is one of the partner sites that would be used by Outbrain or Taboola. So I wanted to see, well, okay, what kind of stuff is happening here? And this is a screenshot of what's happening related to banks. So I took that and I created this. And this took about 10 minutes. It's not perfect, but it's just to show you how you can use just a little bit of research and try to create an advertorial. Now, this would be, from here, it would be fine-tuning it and getting the words, you know, the way I want them. But it was more of an exercise just to show you how you could take something that's relevant and try to twist it into an advertorial. So I created a headline, a high-profile analyst says Russian hackers put U.S. banks in state of chaos. Now, none of the items that looked here, and I'll go back, you know, we're not talking about, nobody's talking about chaos, but we know that the banking is a hot thing and we have Russian hackers. So that's what I'm trying to play up in this advertorial. And now I'm just trying to give enough information that, you know, I have the lead here, money sitting in your bank account could be a grave risk. That's the conclusion of high-profile analyst Alex Green. So I'm trying to get the reader interested. And now I have a little bit more copy, and I'm heading toward a transition in the copy, and eventually what I'm trying to do, and this would be a video with one of those little play buttons in the middle. Now I just threw this together, so I didn't have time to make it perfect. But it's enough to show you how you can just use, just doing a little bit of research like that, you could use it to create advertorials. And again, this could be like your first draft, and then you can fine-tune it from here. You could do the same thing with health. You could plug in a hot health topic and look for the sites that you know that the advertorial would be put out on. That will give you an idea of some news, some relevant news things that are happening that you can then transition into an advertorial. So that's kind of the down and dirty view of creating an advertorial, and the clients, Barefoot Writer, New Market Health, which is the publisher for Health Science Institute, and the Oxford Club will have assignments or have assignments now for creating advertorial. So there's a chance here for you to take what we've just went through and create an advertorial and then submit it. So, so let's open the floor for questions.
Hey, Sandy.
Go
ahead, Pam. You go.
We had a question and we answered it, but maybe we'd love your take on it too. What is the difference between an advertorial and an insert ad?
So an insert ad is usually something within the publisher's own e-letter, and it's very short. They're probably, you have a little bit of headline, and maybe the body of the ad insert is maybe, 200 characters long. It's very, very short. And it's not really being placed out in the world as far as like, as we just went through the CNN, people, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have the other components of an advertorial. We want the image, and we're trying to impart a little bit of value. Whereas an ad insert is really just short, and you can't do that. So a little bit of a different beast, and I hope that answers the question. Any other questions? Let's see.
Sherry is asking, where would you most effectively prospect to write advertorials? How best to market yourself, the service? What would you say to that?
To market yourself as a person who writes advertorials?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I think you just do that. I think if you get even if you haven't actually had one published by a client, I think if you do some of the stuff that I did there, where you can show them how you could create an advertorial out of thin air, by that example where we just Googled some topics and create an advertorial, then what you're doing is showing them that you can do that on the fly, that you're able to take all this relevant information that's happening and put it down into a proper size soundbite that could make a great advertorial. And so I think that is sort of a, you know, in copy there's like show and tell. So now you're showing the client you can actually do this. So I would create a bunch of portfolios and be able to send out. Advertorials are a hot topic right now with a lot of companies. So go ahead.
Sandy, I would add to that is going to these sites like the CNNs and where they're being, where you can find advertorials, see the companies that are doing it, and you know that they already know the value of it. So then say, hey, I know how to do this too.
Exactly. Like I said, they're a hot topic, so a lot of companies are using them. The growth we just saw in one of the slides, they're going to continue to be something that companies are using. So the demand is there, and I think just being able to talk that lingo about advertorial is going to sort of give you an edge over a lot of people who are clueless as to what an advertorial is. So you have a lot that you can leverage to your advantage. That you know how to do them. As Katie said, look at all the different sites. BuzzFeed is a great place also for advertorials. So look around at places like that. And then, if you have the names of marketing people in different companies, you can drop them an email, write them a letter, and let them know you're available to write advertorials. Remember, we're playing on, just as an advertorial takes advantage of news, these are hot things for marketers, so if you can play that up and just dropping the fact that you know what advertorials are, you could drop the fact that, hey, I'm familiar with Taboola, those kind of things, those buzzwords, I think would get you attention.
I see a question here. Google has trending search term reports. Is there something like this for what's trending and top of mind? And before you answer that, I was just going to say, if you're on Facebook, there is a trending column usually. Like right now at this minute, where 10,000 people are talking about Bob Barker or Reba McEntire or Quest Diagnostics, not sure why, and you can click see more, and then, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of things that are trending.
Wait, did I just hear that Bob Barker and Reba McEntire are
No, they're talking about it. He just turned 93.
Oh, no.
But, yeah, you can make up stuff, too. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking you could create an advertorial. Bob Barker proposes to Reba McEntire.
There you go. Well, she did just get divorced,
Oh, there you go. But that's a great source. So any of those places like that where you can get trending relevant topics would be great.
And then, to me, there's the evergreen stuff, too. Like, everyone's always trying to diet. Everyone's always trying to save money or make money. There's that stuff that is never ending in desire. So you can always tap into those things, too. What else do we have here? Oh, here's a great one. It seemed that the advertorials had just one CTA. Is it okay to have links to the videos or the sales page throughout the advertorial?
One is preferred, and that's more or less the standard of what people are finding works best. And you can look around and see if there are other examples of several links in your advertorial, but I think what you'll find is that just having the one is going to work best. And particularly in the case of advertorial, we're talking on these online, they're really short. So what happens is if you have too many links, that actually backfires, and the prospect sees it as, it's sales, look how many links they definitely want me to click, you know what I mean? So you have to be careful, and you just don't want to create that negative impression, which is why we're trying to keep the focus tight. It's like tension and drama, and we just want one thing that we want to do with that tension, and that's to get the reader to click. So if you put, just like we had mentioned earlier, if you put too many images, it clutters it up. And if you have too many links, it becomes cluttered, and we want to avoid that. So I think the tighter, it's better with one call to action.
Okay. All righty. Now, how is an advertorial different from a blog post that has a call to action or a Johnson box at the end?
You know, I think the biggest thing here is if you're working with clients who are on the networks, you know, they're going to be paying to be placed on these places that have 1 billion visitors coming to them a month, or the other one who has, you know, half, you know, what was it, 577 million customers. There are blogs that do have a lot of visitors, but probably not in that volume. So I think that's a difference. And if you are putting blogs on there, if they're not quite constructed like an advertorial, then it's not quite an advertorial. You know, you'll have the call to action. It can be editorial content. I mean, you could do that and certainly mimic everything that we've just done here and put it on a blog and see how it does. But I think what you'll find is just because there's not the power of volume, that the clicks that you'll get aren't going to be big enough, if that makes sense.
We have a couple questions on the display networks and how they work and how marketers pay. And I didn't know if you want to go through that in a bit more detail. The first question is, could you explain what the display networks, and how they might be approached? And then there's a follow-up about what marketers pay, and is the copywriter paid accordingly on those clicks?
So what happens is the marketer, the company, will actually call someone at one of the display network companies, like a Taboola or an Outbrain, and they'll say, look, I want to be able to get my advertorial placed on these sites, and they might know in advance what sites they want to place them on, or they might ask for the rep at that company to give recommendations. And so once the advertorial is written, the publisher sends it to their contact within that organization, and they have the power of being able to get it placed on those sites. It's sort of what I mentioned earlier. Like, imagine you as a marketer, and you're trying to get your advertorial placed on like 100 sites. To do that, you'd have to call up each one of those 100 sites and make a deal, right? You know, hey, here's my advertorial, the back and forth, the communication, the administration work for 100 different people would be tremendous amount of time and resource, which is why these companies like Taboola and Outbrain exist, because they do all that admin work so that the marketer doesn't have to do it. The marketer just turns in the advertorial copy to that person, that company that's then going to get it distributed all over the place. And so they make an arrangement. They're paying a fee. They're paying every time somebody clicks. They have to pay that company, you know, whether it's 25 cents a click up to 75 cents a click. So every time you click on an advertorial, you actually are costing that company that money. And so that's how the compensation works. As the copywriter, you're paid a completely different fee to write the advertorial. So and each company will have a different thing. So they may pay you a flat fee. Say, hey, can you write this advertorial? They're going to take care of getting it placed on the network. That's not what you have to worry about. You just have to create the advertorial, and they're going to pay you a fee. Now, what can also happen is some companies might say, I'll pay you a flat fee, and I may also pay you X royalty for every name that you get signed up, or I'll pay you if this advertorial is going to take the person to a paid product and they actually buy, I might pay you a percentage of the sale because I didn't get it without you creating the advertorial, and that's where that royalty would come in. So it can be a combination of a flat fee or an advertorial, but the company you're writing it for is going to pay you that money, and that's separate money than that they're paying the content distribution people.
I mute myself while you're answering, so we don't have background noise, so that's a little delay there. David has a really good question. Should a very short insert approach lead to a news feed linked to a longer transition advertorial before leading to then a landing page with the real offer?
It could, and I think that each client will be different in how they want to do it. You know, a lot of what used to be is that, and I shouldn't say used to be because it probably still is happening, that people are using the advertorial where they're going to capture a name, and that name is going to go in that publisher's e-letter, and the publisher is going to write to them and eventually sell them that way. However, what a lot of companies, the reason why they started moving to the advertising networks is that they could put a paid product right up there. So the advertorial, when you clicked, would take them over to the promotion that sold that person right there. So it was a way to get that money up front from the customer without going through the other process of nurturing them, that kind of thing. So ideally what I'm saying is that a lot of it is used to get the paid service right up front with the advertorial, and I hope that makes sense.
Okay. So then now we have a question. Is it like mailing lists or Facebook ads where you can build a target portfolio based on demographics and psychographics?
Facebook, Facebook, you can generate leads and paid on Facebook. It's just a little bit different. I mean, they could fall into the category of advertorial for sure, but it's a little bit different in the fact that we have generally we're putting this advertorial that you've written on all these other places that are out there that exist. Okay.
Oh, I think they're thinking about the targeting, the audience targeting part of it. If I'm reading this right, like when you're talking to display networks, can they
target? Yes. They can do. Yeah. Okay. So they have a lot of the same tools that a lot of Facebook people have. Even if you're doing Google and you're doing a pay-per-click campaign, you can do a lot of targeting there, and you can do a lot of remarketing as well. So they have the capability to do a lot of targeting, just like a lot of other people do. So, but that's the conversation that the client usually will have that conversation with the display network company. So they'll let them know, look, I'm selling a financial product, and I want to go for sites that generate a high traffic that are related to financial, and preferably, most of the time, the people that sign up to financial products are older men, so I want to target mostly those. So they can have that conversation with the company, and the company will come back and say, okay, based on what you told me, here's the recommendation of the sites that we would place your advertorial. You as a copywriter, the client would feed you that and tell you exactly what we just said. So listen, I want you to write an editorial. It's going to be for financial. I'm targeting older men. So yeah, they can target.
Okay, cool. We have a question about networks, but somebody asked what the normal fees are for advertorials, and we have a copywriter rates guide, and I'm going to put the link in there. It's on our website under it's a free document, and it's on our website under the navigation free articles. And the drop-down menu has copywriter rates, but I'll put the link in there too. We have $800 to $1,500 plus per advertorial. Is that typical from what you're seeing, Sandy?
I would think so, and I would say too that as you gain more experience with these, like anything, as you gain more experience, and you have more success, you could probably command higher fees. So I think that's a great target to have that, but I would keep in the back of your mind that as you build a portfolio, if this is where you want to specialize, and you build a portfolio of very successful advertorials, then you can definitely raise that fee.
Cool, okay. We have a question. What is the difference between display network and a content network?
Pretty much kind of one of the same, like Google says display network, and that's like a lot of like banner type ads, and then Google will talk about a content network, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, where you're targeting for sites, and you want to put more than just a banner ad. You actually want to have a little, like we're doing here, you want advertorials with a little bit more content involved into your ad. So it's a step. How to say this, probably like a step removed from a space ad or a banner ad, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure. Another question is, are advertorials all about a sales, or can it be informative to pique curiosity and include a CPA?
No, as we said earlier, you can drive it to a sale, or you can drive it to capture a name. That would be the whatever you want, whatever your client wants you to do it as the end result of what you're trying to do. But if your ad is an informative, you know that we don't want to be just so informative that they don't do anything. So while we want to impart value, we want it to be informative, but we also want those other surrounding components that we talked about. We want it to be somewhat relevant. We want it to be curiosity so that we can get that transition from the value part to the click.
Okay, awesome. Now let's see about can you talk about how to decide where your advertorial is displayed? And there's a follow-up question that kind of piggybacks that, where how do you reconcile the differences in tailoring an advertorial to possibly diverse targets? One of the criteria for advertorials is to be true to the rest of the publication. I think, you know, the answer is where is your audience, right?
Yes.
The correct audience.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, the client will be able to feed you. They basically will know as they work with the content distribution people, they kind of know, if they've been doing this for a little bit of time, they kind of know the sites that work best for them for advertorials. So they'll be able to supply that to you, and you'll know how to match the format that you're creating to wherever that's going to be displayed. That's the kind of communication you'll have with the client. They'll be able to tell you that, hey, we're going to put an advertorial out. It works really well for these sites. Now, maybe they want to test other sites, and they might say, hey, we're going to be testing other things. But generally, they kind of know the sites where they can get the most buck for their most money.
Yeah.
Wording here.
No, that's okay. Yeah, bang for the buck. It's funny because when I wrote the one that you showed earlier, that was a traditional magazine advertorial, but it was very, very targeted to people who are in a certain sport that requires high energy and all that stuff. And so it wouldn't go to diverse audiences. It's really going to have its biggest value when it goes to the audience that has been super targeted. And then I know you probably have seen them broader, but it's still targeting people who are interested in health or making money or those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's all we have.
Good.
Wow.
Questions.
Sandy, this was a master class. This was really good.
Oh, thank you. I hope everybody got a lot out of it. A lot of great questions. So I just, let me just end with saying, just, go back and study the examples, and just now that you're aware of advertorials, it's sort of like that thing, where you see something, then you can't unsee it. So now when you search online, and you're going to start noticing advertorials, I swear it's going to happen. It's going to be like, oh, here it is, and start creating a swipe file of advertorials and get really familiar and just study them. That's going to help you master this and just become an expert at creating these advertorials that clients desperately need. So if that's all questions are answered.
Looks that way.
Great.
Oh, someone's saying, when is our next advanced training submission window? Mark is asking. Hi, Mark.
I believe it's the first week of the year. It'll be on your member page. If you go to your member page, it'll tell you there. Or actually, or is it next week?
I know. I'm like,
yeah.
We'll find out.
Oh, here comes Bill. Wait, Bill's going to tell. The next window is
the hot seat submission.
Okay, we're going to do another hot seat in January, and the submission windows for the hot seats will be Monday, January 2nd. Oh no, I'm sorry, Tuesday the 3rd, and till noon on Monday the 9th. So that first week of January is where you submit any copy that you'd like to be reviewed in a hot seat. That hot seat will take place on January 19th. And then the next client submission window will be the week of January 23rd. We're not doing it this month because of the holidays. So there you go. You have about, you have a little over a month to get your next submissions ready. You can review the past lessons, listen to this great one again, and enjoy the holidays too.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so study what we went over and maybe consider submitting an advertorial as one of your submissions. And as Katie mentioned earlier in the whole beginning here, there's still more to come with ADC. So if you're submitted and it wasn't picked up by a client, that doesn't mean it's over. I would continue to submit because you just never know what will happen.
Hear, hear.
All right, well, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and everyone have a great holiday.
Bye, Sandy. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Next year.